Welcome, traveler of time. Find a comfortable place to rest, perhaps a quiet room, the soft weight of a blanket, and the steady rhythm of your breath. Let the world around you fade, piece by piece, until only your heartbeat and my voice remain. Tonight, we will journey far beyond the present moment, beyond the noise of cities and the light of screens, to a land where rivers once carved the first stories of humankind. Imagine the whisper of water flowing between the Tigris and the Euphrates. The air is warm, touched by the scent of clay and grain. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rings, slow and deep. This is ancient Sumer, the cradle of civilization. Here, people first learned to write their dreams upon clay. They counted time by the moon, built cities from dust, and gazed at the same stars that now shine above you. As you listen, allow the ancient rhythm of their world to guide your breath, calm, slow, unhurried. Let each word carry you deeper into history, like a gentle tide returning to shore. You are not merely hearing a story, you are remembering one, the story of how humanity began, how kings ruled for thousands of years, and how the first spark of civilization flickered into light. So, close your eyes, let the night hold you softly, and when you're ready, we'll walk together across the sands of time, back to the first dawn of memory. Imagine lying beneath a sky so still that you can hear your own breath drift into the darkness. The air is soft, scented faintly of sand and distant water. A single star flickers above you, pale, unwavering, like a silent witness to the birth of everything. Now, let your thoughts wander backward, far beyond the reach of memory, past the age of iron and bronze, past the empires and the wars and the walls. Go back to a time before time was counted. Here, the world is young. The soil is rich and dark, shaped by two ancient rivers that twist through a wide, shimmering plain. Their names, Tigris and Euphrates, will one day become famous. But tonight, they are simply the veins of a sleeping earth. Between them lies a land that will cradle the first cities, the first laws, the first written words. This is Sumer, the first great civilization. The people of Sumer will call their land Kingur, the place of the noble lords. It is a landscape alive with rhythm, the murmur of water through canals, the hum of insects rising at dusk, the rustle of reeds brushing against the wind. You can almost see them, farmers guiding plows carved from wood, oxen pulling patiently through the soil, children carrying baskets of barley under the soft gold of the morning sun. And yet, beneath this simple harmony, there is something greater stirring. The Sumerians believe that kingship is divine, not something chosen by men, but sent from the heavens. To them, every city has its own god, and each god chooses a single human to rule in their stead. A king is not just a leader. He is a bridge between earth and sky, between dust and eternity. You can almost imagine the first coronation. The sky above Eridu, their earliest city, glows with the faint light of dawn. Priests stand in a semicircle beside the temple steps, their white linen robes fluttering in the morning breeze. They lift their hands to the heavens, chanting softly in a language so old it feels like wind moving through reeds. Somewhere within the temple, a clay tablet lies waiting. Upon it, a scribe will soon carve the name of the very first king, Ululim of Eridu. They say Ululim ruled for 28,800 years. You pause and smile at the number impossibly long, stretching beyond comprehension. But in the calm of the night, with the stars glimmering above, It feels less like an exaggeration and more like a dream, a poetic way of saying that once humanity's story was measured not in years, but in wonder. After Alulum came Alagar, ruling for 36,000 years. Another name carved into clay, another whisper in the endless stream of time. To the Sumerians, these kings were not ordinary men. They were beings chosen in the time before the flood, when heaven still touched the earth. It was an age of shining cities, of divine order, of perfect balance between human and God. Now, imagine standing beside one of those ancient temples. The air is heavy with the scent of wet clay and incense. A ziggurat, part mountain, part monument, rises above you, its steps glowing orange in the sunset. You hear the distant sound of a lyre, the slow rhythm of a drum echoing across the plain. The city breathes around you, calm, ordered, eternal. The people go about their work as the king watches from his terrace, the sacred crown resting on his head, the symbol of heaven's favor. He is not feared, at least not in the way later kings will be. He is revered, the keeper of the world's rhythm. His duty is to maintain harmony, to keep the rivers flowing, the harvests steady, and the gods content. Every season follows the next in gentle repetition. When the rivers rise, the farmers bless them. When they fall, the people gather in the courtyards of their temples to sing. Time feels circular, not something that begins or ends, but something that returns again and again, like the floodwaters of the Euphrates. You begin to sense why the Sumerians believed in such long rains. To them, life was part of a divine pattern, and their kings were eternal threads in the fabric of creation. Their world was slow, deliberate, unhurried, like a dream that never needed to end. In the quiet between moments, you might hear the sound of a stylus pressing into soft clay. Each mark is a breath, a heartbeat, a message to the future. The scribe does not know that his work will survive for thousands of years, that one day, long after his own city has turned to dust, someone will find the tablet and read those names again. But he writes anyway, carefully, reverently. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. It is a single line, yet it contains a universe. You imagine the scribe pausing to dip his reed stylus into the wet clay again. His hands are steady. His eyes reflect the flickering light of an oil lamp. Outside, the night air cools. The city sleeps. The Tigris and Euphrates murmur in the distance, their endless conversation carrying secrets older than memory. The clay tablets will multiply, not just lists of kings, but hymns, poems, inventories, contracts, prayers. The written word itself will take form here among these quiet rivers. The Sumerians will teach the world how to remember, and as centuries unfold, new cities will rise. Ur, Uruk, Kish, Nippur, each one claiming its own divine lineage, its own place in the celestial order. Kings will come and go, each leaving behind the soft imprint of a reign that will one day be recorded in the same careful hand. But that is for later nights. For now, the story rests in Eridu, under the watch of Alulum, the first king, the first bridge between heaven and earth. You take a deep breath and let the image settle in your mind. A calm river reflecting a pale moon. A temple glowing softly in the distance. A scribe bent over a tablet, whispering the names of gods and men into eternity. Somewhere in that silence, you begin to understand the strange peace of it all. Perhaps the numbers were never meant to be literal. Perhaps they were the Sumerians' way of expressing something beyond time, the feeling that creation itself was endless, and that, through kingship, the divine rhythm continued without interruption. The king list is not just a document, it is a lullaby, a chant to keep memory alive while the world slowly forgets. And as you listen to its ancient cadence, you feel your own thoughts begin to slow. The modern world fades. The noise, the lights, the endless urgency all dissolve into the soft hum of ancient water. In the gentle dark, you find yourself drifting closer to the Sumerians' dream, a dream of perfect order, of a universe that never rushed, never broke, never ended. You close your eyes and let it wash over you, the rhythm of their rivers, the pulse of their gods, the whisper of their kings. Somewhere far away, the tablet still rests beneath the sand, its marks still intact, its words still echoing across 5,000 years. And if you listen closely enough, you can almost hear them, faint, rhythmic, eternal. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. You breathe in, slowly. The stars above are the same stars they once watched. The earth beneath you is the same ancient ground. Time bends, softly. The story continues. And you, listener, traveler, dreamer, drift gently into the first sleep of the world. Imagine the first morning of the world. The horizon is pale and quiet, washed in soft gold. The air is still cool, and the earth smells of wet clay and young grass. A flock of white birds drifts lazily above the shimmering water where two ancient rivers meet. You stand at the edge of that place, a wide, fertile plain that will one day be called Mesopotamia, the land between rivers. This is where it begins. In the far south, near the whispering marshes of the Persian Gulf, small clusters of huts stand upon raised mounds of earth. Each one is built from sun-dried mud, its walls smoothed by careful hands. Smoke rises from the hearths inside, carrying the smell of grain and roasted dates. The people here are the ancestors of Sumer. They do not yet call themselves Sumerians. Not yet, but already. They shape the land with quiet wisdom. The rivers Tigris to the east, Euphrates to the west, bring both life and peril. Each year they flood their banks, spreading rich silt across the plains, feeding the crops that sustain every village. But when the waters rise too high, they swallow homes and fields alike. To live here means to live in rhythm with the unpredictable breath of the rivers. You watch as they build canals, guiding the waters through narrow channels that gleam like silver threads in the sun. It is back-breaking work, done with simple tools and patient hands. But through it, the people learn something miraculous, that nature can be shaped, balanced, and tamed. In time, the small villages begin to grow. Where once stood scattered huts, there are now streets of brick, storage houses filled with barley, granaries tall as trees. One village becomes a town. One town becomes a city. And somewhere amid this slow unfolding, kingship descends from heaven. The Sumerians will later say it happened in Eridu, the oldest of their cities, the first seat of divine order. But here, at the beginning, you see only the faint outline of it, a man chosen among his people, not for strength or conquest, but for his wisdom. He is the mediator between humans and gods, between the chaos of nature and the calm of the divine. You watch him stand before the people, the morning light tracing the edge of his robe. His voice is low, steady, certain. He speaks of irrigation, of rituals to please the water deities, of the balance between abundance and restraint, and the people listen. Around him, the first temple begins to rise, a simple platform of packed earth at first, then higher, step by step, until it stands above the floodplain. This will one day become a ziggurat, a sacred mountain for a land that has none. The Sumerians believe that gods dwell in the sky, but visit the temples through ritual. When the people sing, when the priests burn sweet-smelling incense, when the first fruits of harvest are offered, the gods are said to descend through invisible stairways of light. In this way, heaven and earth remain bound together through song, through clay, through faith. As the city grows, so too does the sense of identity. You hear new words in their language: En for Lord, Nin for lady, Lugal for great man. These are not merely titles, they are reflections of divine roles. To be king is to bear responsibility, not only for people, but for the harmony of creation itself. In the cool of the evening, you walk through the narrow lanes of Eridu. The air hums softly with life. The scent of oil lamps mingles with the aroma of baked bread. From the temple comes the slow, melodic chanting of priests calling upon Enki, the god of wisdom and water, the patron of this city. You pause and listen. The sound is deep and soothing, part prayer, part rhythm of existence itself. Somewhere nearby, a scribe etches signs into clay with a sharpened reed. Each wedge-shaped mark captures the pulse of human thought, the earliest form of writing. He records offerings, names, weights, and blessings. He does not yet know that this simple act, pressing symbols into soft earth, will one day change the world. The Sumerians will invent the art of record and memory. Through them, humanity will learn to preserve its voice. The city grows busier. Boats glide through canals, carrying baskets of grain, reeds for weaving, and clay for building. Potters spin wheels, shaping bowls and jars that glimmer like wet stone. Children run through the dust, laughing, while women pound barley with steady rhythm. Life here feels slow, eternal, as if every movement, every task is part of something greater. And yet, beyond the peace of Eridu, the plains stretch endlessly northward. Other settlements rise, Yor, Uruk, Kish, each one drawn to the fertile soil and the promise of order. The kingship that once belonged only to Eridu begins to move, carried by divine will from city to city, as though heaven itself drifts along the rivers, choosing new homes for its light. After the kingship descended from heaven, the king list will say, it was in Eridu. Then Eridu fell, and the kingship was taken to Bad Tabira, then to Larak, then to Sippar, then to Shurapek. Each transfer marks a new chapter, a new dawn of belief, architecture, and song. The world begins to weave itself into a tapestry of divine cities, each connected by the unseen thread of kingship, by the same quiet reverence for the gods who rule from above. As night falls, you stand at the edge of the city walls. The air cools, and a soft mist begins to rise from the river. The temple torches flicker in the distance, golden and still. The world is vast, but it feels gentle, a slow heartbeat beneath the stars. You begin to understand that for the Sumerians, creation itself was not a single event, but a living rhythm. The gods were not distant overseers. They were neighbors, teachers, companions in the shaping of the world. And humanity, in its humility, was both servant and steward, chosen to continue the divine act of making and maintaining. In this sacred partnership, kingship became more than power. It became duty, the balance between heaven's will and earth's needs, between water and stone, chaos and calm. As you watch the city of Eridu shimmer under the moonlight, you realize why the Sumerians spoke in such vast numbers, why they imagined kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years. For them, each ruler was not just a man, but an era, a living embodiment of the divine cycle. Each king's reign was a reflection of cosmic order, as endless and steady as the flowing of the rivers themselves. The night deepens, the sounds of the city fade, the distant song of the priests, the whisper of reeds, the quiet splash of a boat against the shore. You close your eyes and let the story settle within you. The beginning of civilization does not feel like an explosion of progress, but like a slow, peaceful unfolding, a dawn that never quite ends. From the waters of Eridu, from the clay and the breath of gods, humanity learns to build, to write, to rule, and in that gentle learning, the first light of history begins to glow. You listen for a moment longer to the river, to the wind, to the memory of divine kingship descending from the stars, and then, softly, you drift once more into the calm rhythm of ancient time. Imagine walking across a vast plain just after sunrise. The air is warm but not yet heavy, and the earth beneath your feet hums faintly with the memory of water. To your left, a river gleams in the distance, smooth, slow, eternal, and beyond it, a shape begins to rise from the horizon. At first, it looks like a mirage, but as the light strengthens, you see walls, massive, gleaming, sun-baked walls stretching far into the distance. This is Uruk, the jewel of ancient Sumer, the first true city in the world. The air hums with life. Farmers bring baskets of grain from the outer fields. Potters carry their vessels to market. Herds of goats move through the narrow lanes, their bells tinkling softly. The scent of oil, baked bread, and clay mingles in the warm wind. Everywhere you feel the rhythm of human purpose, calm, steady, deliberate. Uruk was said to be built by a king whose name still echoes through the ages, Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine and 1/3 man. His deeds would one day be sung in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving story. But in this moment, there is no epic, only the quiet, luminous pulse of a living city. You walk through its great gates, said to be guarded by lions carved from stone. The walls themselves stretch for miles, built from countless bricks of baked clay. Each brick bears a mark, the symbol of the king who commanded its making. It is as if the very city carries his name in every stone. Inside the walls, Uruk unfolds like a tapestry. To the north stands the Inna district, sacred to Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Here, temples rise layer upon layer, each one built upon the ruins of an older shrine. Columns of reed and wood are wrapped in brilliant mosaics of lapis lazuli, shell, and gold. When the sunlight touches them, they shimmer like water. Priests move through the courtyards, their steps measured and serene. Incense drifts through the air, carrying the scent of cedar and myrrh. The sound of low chanting blends with the rustle of palm leaves and the cooing of doves nesting in the temple eaves. You pause to listen. The voices rise and fall like waves, a song older than memory, a song meant to call the gods down from the heavens to dwell among their people. The Sumerians believe that the city itself is alive. Every brick, every tree, every canal is part of a grand design, a reflection of divine order on earth. The temples are not only places of worship, but cosmic centers. binding the human and the divine, and Uruk is their masterpiece. Beyond the temples, the city spreads out in measured beauty. There are workshops where metal is hammered into tools and ornaments, where clay becomes art, where fibers are woven into intricate fabrics. There are libraries where scribes sit in silence, their styluses tapping gently against wet clay as they record the pulse of life trade, laws, hymns, harvests. For the first time in human history, writing becomes routine, a part of daily life, as ordinary and miraculous as breathing. You move through the marketplace, where voices mingle in 100 tones. Traders from faraway lands bring lapis from Afghanistan, copper from Oman, cedar from Lebanon. In return, they take Sumerian grain, textiles, and crafted goods. Here, the world first learns the power of exchange, not only of goods, but of ideas. Everything in Uruk feels balanced. The city breathes in rhythm with the seasons, the rising of the rivers, the sowing and reaping of crops, the waxing and waning of the moon. Even time itself is measured with new precision. The Sumerians divide the hour into 60 parts, the circle into 360 degrees. These simple numbers will echo forever, finding their way into every clock and compass humanity will ever make. At dusk, the city glows with golden light. Oil lamps flicker along the narrow streets. Musicians gather near the temple gates, playing gentle melodies on lyres and flutes. The air is filled with warmth and laughter. You notice something subtle in the people's faces, a kind of quiet pride. For the first time, humans see themselves not as wanderers or survivors, but as creators. They have learned to harness water, to build cities that do not fall with the flood, to carve their names into eternity. And yet, amid this splendor, they remain deeply humble before the gods. Every victory, every harvest, every sunrise is still seen as a gift from above. The king Gilgamesh, or perhaps one of those who came before him, walks the terraces at night, offering prayers to the heavens. He is not only ruler, but mediator, charged with maintaining the balance between divine will and human effort. From the temple of Inanna, the priests observe the stars. They map their movements across the sky, marking patterns and cycles. From this quiet devotion will come the first astronomy, a science born not from curiosity alone, but from reverence. The people of Uruk understand that the heavens are a mirror of the earth, and the earth a reflection of the heavens. To know one is to honor the other. As the night deepens, the city quiets, the markets close, the lamps dim. Only the temples remain alive with soft light. You can hear the slow rhythm of prayers carried on the wind, mingling with the sound of the river against the banks. You imagine the city from above, a patchwork of courtyards and rooftops, canals glinting like threads of silver beneath the stars. It feels timeless, eternal, a city that could never truly fade. And perhaps that is why the Sumerians believed their kings ruled for tens of thousands of years. To them, greatness was not measured in lifetimes, but in harmony, the ability to sustain the sacred rhythm of creation. When a king ruled wisely, the rivers flowed gently, the harvests were abundant, and the gods smiled upon the land. Such a reign felt endless. You walk once more through the quiet streets. A cool wind stirs the palm trees. The air smells faintly of clay and sweet oil. Somewhere, a mother sings to her child, a soft melody, half prayer, half lullaby. Her voice drifts upward, blending with the whisper of the city's breath. It is easy to imagine that somewhere beyond the stars, the gods are listening. Uruk sleeps, the first city, the heart of the world. Its temples stand tall against the darkness. Its rivers gleam in the moonlight. Its people dream of gods and gardens, of balance and beauty. And as you watch, you feel the same stillness they must have felt, that sense of belonging in a universe vast yet harmonious, ancient yet alive. The Sumerians have built more than walls and temples. They have built the pattern of civilization itself, the rhythm of city life, the flow of trade, the pulse of writing, the grace of law. Even now, thousands of years later, every city hums with the same energy that once filled Uruk. Every clock that ticks, every line written, every story told, all of it carries a fragment of their legacy. As the last torchlight fades, you take a deep breath. The air is warm, still, eternal. You close your eyes and listen to the river, to the stars, to the faint heartbeat of the first great city. And as you drift toward sleep, you carry with you the quiet truth the Sumerians once knew, that even in the smallest brick, the humblest tablet, or the softest song, the divine still lives, endlessly, peacefully, forever. Imagine, for a moment, standing once more on the banks of the Euphrates. The sun is pale and heavy above you, its light reflecting across the wide brown water. The air smells of heat and dust. The reeds tremble in the faintest wind. But something feels different now. The rhythm that once pulsed so gently through the land has shifted. The water runs higher than usual. The currents twist and tug in strange ways. The farmers along the banks glance toward the sky more often, uncertain of what it means. This is the beginning of Sumer's first great trial. For centuries, the people have trusted the rivers. They have built their cities in careful balance with the floods, timing their planting, shaping their canals, honoring the gods of water. But the earth is changing. Some seasons, the rivers rise too early, drowning the fields before the barley can grow. Other years, they barely rise at all, leaving the land cracked and thirsty. You walk along a canal that once shimmered with cool water, but now lies nearly dry. The clay walls crumble under the heat. A boy throws a pebble into the hollow trench and listens for the echo, a sound like an empty breath. In Uruk, the people begin to whisper that the gods are restless. Priests climb to the top of ziggurats and burn offerings, sending the scent of cedar and myrrh into the morning air. They chant the old hymns, the same ones that once kept the heavens near, but the sky gives no answer. The king, wise and weary, consults with his council. They spread out maps of the canals, tracing them with their fingers. Perhaps, one says, the channels must be deepened. Perhaps, says another, the floods have shifted their course, and so the work begins again. You can see them from afar, lines of men and women moving under the sun, carrying baskets of clay, rebuilding the walls of the irrigation channels, carving new paths for the water to flow. Their rhythm is slow and steady, a heartbeat of endurance. Still, nature tests them. One year, a flood sweeps through Shuruppak, tearing at its foundations. The streets fill with rushing water. The fields vanish beneath a silver lake. When it recedes, the land is changed. Old boundaries are gone. Canals are lost. The people of Sumer do not curse the flood. Instead, they tell stories. They speak of Ziusudra, the wise king of Shuruppak, who was warned by the gods that a great deluge would come, greater than any before. They say he built a great boat and filled it with animals and seeds, carrying the essence of life itself. When the waters finally withdrew, he offered a sacrifice of gratitude, and the gods moved by his faith, granted him eternal life. Perhaps it was only a story, or perhaps somewhere in that ancient flood, the people felt a truth too large to measure, that even when the world washes clean, hope endures like a reed rising from the mud. In the centuries that follow, the floods lessen, but new challenges take their place. The soil begins to taste of salt, invisible crystals that creep upward from the ground as irrigation water evaporates under the fierce sun. At first, the farmers barely notice. Then, slowly, their crops begin to thin. Barley grows weak. Wheat refuses to rise. You walk through the fields one afternoon and see it, a faint white shimmer coating the dark earth. When you bend to touch it, it feels dry and brittle, like forgotten tears. The priests say it is a test from the gods. The farmers say the water has betrayed them, but quietly the scribes record it, another change in the rhythm of the land. Sumer is learning the hardest lesson of civilization, that progress is fragile. The people adapt. They shift their crops. They build new reservoirs farther from the sea, where the water is cleaner. They turn their knowledge into survival, their patience into wisdom. In doing so, they invent something entirely new, planning for the future. Kings no longer rule just for the present. They rule for what is to come. Each reign becomes a link in a chain stretching forward through time, a promise that the world will continue. You can see it in their cities. The temples grow stronger, their foundations deeper. New systems of law appear, rules to keep balance, not only between people and gods, but between neighbor and neighbor. The scribes record these laws on clay, each stroke a quiet act of preservation. At night, the air cools, the city sleeps. The king sits alone on the terrace, looking out across the dark plain. He hears the faint hum of frogs by the river, the whisper of wind through the reeds. He knows his people have endured, not because of divine favor alone, but because of their quiet persistence, their willingness to rebuild again and again. You can almost feel his thoughts, a mixture of weariness and peace. He understands now that the divine gift of kingship is not about eternal life or endless reigns. It is about maintaining balance in a world that constantly shifts. In the temples, the priests begin to speak of Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water, as the true guide of humankind, not a god of storms or fire, but of cleverness, patience, and renewal. It is Enki who helps Ziusudra survive the flood. It is Enki who teaches the first farmers to drain their fields and plant anew. Through him, the Sumerians find hope that change, though painful, is also divine. The king list will one day record this period as a simple passage. Then the flood swept over. After the flood had swept over, kingship descended again from heaven. But beneath those calm words lies a century of resilience, the long, quiet effort of a people who refused to surrender to despair. As the years drift on, the rivers calm once more, the floods find their rhythm, the salt retreats, and out of the long struggle, something new is born, a deeper wisdom, a more grounded kind of faith. The Sumerians begin to see the gods not as distant masters, but as partners in creation. The temples remain sacred, but the fields, too, become holy. Every canal, every harvest, every grain of barley carries within it a spark of divinity. Standing once more by the river, you watch the moon rise. Its reflection ripples across the slow-moving water. The city lights glow softly in the distance. You can almost hear the hum of life returning, the sound of shovels in wet clay, the laughter of children near the canals, the low murmur of prayers whispered to the wind. Sumer endures. Through flood and famine, through silence and storm, it continues to build, to write, to dream. And as the night deepens, you feel the calm that comes after struggle, the kind of peace that only those who have rebuilt from ruin can know. The rivers flow quietly once more, carrying with them not destruction, but memory. And from that memory, civilization moves forward, steady, resilient, eternal. You breathe in the scent of the wet earth rising around you. The stars above shimmer softly, reflected in the slow curve of the Euphrates. And for a moment, you understand what the Sumerians must have felt, that life, fragile as clay, is also sacred beyond measure. The flood has passed. The world begins again. Imagine yourself standing at dawn, just beyond the walls of Uruk. The horizon glows a soft rose, and the air carries the scent of warm clay and barley bread. The city before you stirs slowly, like a giant waking from sleep. The sound of morning in Sumer is gentle, the clink of pots, the murmur of prayers, the low rhythm of the loom. But listen closely, and you will sense something deeper. A change is moving through the land. Not a sudden wind, but a slow turning, the kind that shifts the course of rivers and the shape of minds. The old kings, those who ruled for thousands of years, whose reigns stretched beyond imagination, now belong to memory. The stories of Alulim and Alalgar, of Ziosudra and the Great Flood, have become sacred tales, recited by temple scribes in the evenings when the lamps flicker low. But the world they once ruled is no longer quite the same. The rivers still flow, but their moods are tamed by canals. The gods still speak, but their voices are softer, their messages interpreted through the hands of men. The people have learned something profound, that their destiny is not only written in the stars, but also in the marks they press into clay. You walk through the marketplace, where merchants arrange baskets of dates and copper. Nearby, a scribe sits behind a low table, his reed stylus tapping gently on wet tablets. Each stroke, each curve of cuneiform is a quiet revolution, knowledge captured, memory preserved. This is the transformation of Sumer, from a land guided by divine rulers into a civilization guided by human thought. The priests still serve the gods, yes, but their temples now hum with mathematics, astronomy, and law. They measure time by the stars, predict floods by patterns, and carve their observations into clay so that the next generation may learn from them. In Yor, the ziggurat gleams beneath the sun, a mountain built by human hands, layer upon layer of baked brick. It is a symbol, not just of faith, but of order, a bridge between heaven and earth, yes, but also between what is eternal and what can be understood. You wander into the temple courtyard, where an elderly priest records offerings. His eyes are calm, his hands steady. When you ask him how he knows the will of the gods, he smiles softly. The gods are patient, he says. They no longer shout. They whisper through patterns, through stars, through seasons, through the rise and fall of the river. He looks up toward the sky, where the first hint of daylight shimmers. Once, he adds, men waited for the gods to lead them. Now, we listen, and then we act. This new way of thinking spreads quietly through the cities. In Lagash, the rulers begin to issue codes of law, not carved by divine command, but written by human decree. They speak of fairness, of property, of peace. It is the beginning of governance as we know it, the idea that justice can be built, not bestowed. You pass a wall, etched with one such code. The letters glint faintly in the light, their meaning clear even across millennia. Let the strong not harm the weak. How simple it sounds. How revolutionary it must have been. Art, too, begins to change. No longer only the faces of gods and kings, but of workers, of musicians, of mothers holding children. The clay tablets tell not just of floods and creation, but of trade, of love, of dreams. You feel the pulse of something deeply human, the desire to be remembered not only as a people who worshipped, but as a people who lived. In the evenings, when the air cools and the lamps glow with oil, the storytellers gather. They tell of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, a man who sought to defy death, who wandered the earth in search of eternal life. His tale is unlike those of the early kings. It is not about divine rule, but about human longing. You can almost hear the storyteller's voice, slow, steady, filled with sorrow and wisdom. Gilgamesh, he says, was 2 parts God and 1 part man, yet it was the human in him that gave his life meaning. The listeners nod, their faces flickering in lamplight. They understand. In a world once ruled by immortal kings, the greatest story now belongs to a man who learns that immortality is not found in life everlasting, but in the memory of deeds and the legacy of cities. This is the true transformation of Sumer, not the loss of gods, but the awakening of humanity. The fields grow wide, the harvests are measured, trade routes stretch farther than ever, across the desert to Elam, across the sea to Dilmun. Sumer becomes not only a place of worship, but a network of minds, connected by language, by law, by the steady rhythm of work. At night, you wander beyond the walls again. The fields shimmer under the moonlight. You hear the faint hum of irrigation wheels, turning with the same patience as the stars above. You think of the kings of old, of their long reigns, their golden crowns, their thrones carved from stone. And you think of the scribes, now bending over their clay, recording the flow of grain, the measure of silver, the stories of creation. In their quiet work, the world is reborn. Perhaps the gods have not fallen silent at all. Perhaps they have simply changed their language from thunder and flood to the whisper of the stylus, the curve of a letter, the shape of an idea. And as you stand there, between earth and sky, between the past and the dawn of reason, you understand what the Sumerians learned across generations. That divinity is not lost when men begin to think. It is revealed in every act of creation, every attempt to understand. The transformation of Sumer is not a single moment, but a slow awakening, like light creeping across a plain. The first glimmer of civilization as we know it. You breathe in the night air. The scent of baked earth mingles with the faint perfume of tamarisk trees. In the distance, the ziggurat of Uruk glows against the horizon, its top just touching the stars. It stands as both temple and monument, a reminder of what was divine and what humanity has become. The gods no longer walk the streets, but their legacy continues in every word written, every law made, every dream shaped by mortal hands. And as you watch the first rays of morning spill over the plain, you realize that the story of the Sumerians, from gods to men, from myth to memory, is not just their story. It is the beginning of ours. Imagine standing at twilight on the ruins of what was once Eridu, the city that Sumerians called the first of all cities. The wind moves softly across the plain. Fragments of baked brick lie scattered like pieces of memory, still warm from the day's sun. The river glides in the distance, no longer grand, but still eternal. You close your eyes, and for a moment the silence feels full, as though the land itself is remembering. The Sumerians have faded from the earth, but not from time. Their temples may have sunk into dust, but their ideas flow onward, carried by traders, by scribes, by the slow and steady current of human curiosity. It begins, as all stories do, with the word. Once, long ago, a scribe pressed a stylus into wet clay to record the measure of grain. That small act, so simple, so practical, was the seed of all writing that followed. From Sumer's cuneiform, the Akkadians learned, then the Babylonians, then the Assyrians, and beyond them, through Phoenicia, the alphabet began to take shape. Letters that would one day form the languages you speak now. You trace a finger in the air, shaping invisible lines. Each mark feels ancient, familiar, alive. Every word written today carries within it the echo of that first inscription. Every library, every poem, every letter, all whisper back to those Sumerian tablets that once dried in the sun beside the Euphrates. The legacy of Sumer is not just in invention, but in imagination. Look toward the heavens, where the stars still drift in their ancient courses. Long before the telescopes, long before the myths of Greece or Rome, Sumerian astronomers mapped the sky. They divided the circle into 360 degrees. They marked the hours of the day, the minutes of the hour, the months of the year, the rhythm of your modern life. Every clock you read, every calendar you turn, is a quiet inheritance from those early watchers of the night. You imagine them, robed and silent, standing atop their ziggurat under the open sky. They watched the slow journey of Venus and called her Inanna. They saw Mars glow red and named it after the god of judgment. To them, the stars were not distant fires, but the living symbols of divine order, the map of all that was and would ever be. Their system of numbers, based on 60, still shapes the way you measure time and space. Even now, when you look at a clock and see 60 minutes in an hour, or measure a circle in degrees, you are, in a quiet way, speaking the mathematics of Sumer. But perhaps their greatest gift was not what they built or counted, but how they dreamed. From Sumer's myths came the patterns of storytelling that would echo through every civilization that followed. The tale of a hero who defies the gods, Gilgamesh, would one day inspire the legends of Heracles, of Odysseus, of kings and wanderers seeking meaning beyond their power. The flood that swept over Shurapuk became the memory retold by countless cultures, from the Hebrews, Noah, to the Greeks, Deucalion, the dream of immortality, the sorrow of loss, the search for wisdom, all find their roots here in the mud and stars of Mesopotamia. You walk slowly through the fading light, past the outlines of what once were walls and courtyards. Somewhere beneath your feet, buried beneath layers of earth, lie the tablets of a civilization that dreamed the world into story. And yet their influence reached even further. When Babylon rose, it inherited Sumer's bones, the writing, the gods, the very shape of thought. When Egypt built its temples along the Nile, its priests studied the stars, as the Sumerians once had. When Greece began to reason with philosophy, it inherited, unknowingly, the first questions that the Sumerian priests had already asked. What is justice? What is the soul? Why must all things pass? You may not think of it as you walk through a modern city, the hum of machines replacing the murmur of rivers. But beneath every law, every school, every written sign, there lingers the quiet pulse of Sumer, a rhythm that began 5,000 years ago and has never truly stopped. Even their concept of kingship, that rulers are chosen not by mere force, but by divine right, and yet must serve their people, became the model for civilizations, from Persia to Rome, from medieval Europe to distant lands, across oceans they never imagined. Their art, too, left a mark. The stepped towers of their temples inspired ziggurats that later inspired the pyramids. Their cylinder seals, tiny carved stones rolled across clay, were the first form of signature, the earliest expression of individual identity in human record. In them you can see the ancestors of the artist's brushstroke, the writer's name, the fingerprint that says, "I was here." You bend down and imagine picking up one of those seals, smooth, small, perfectly carved. Its surface tells a story, a king before the gods, a river flowing between them, a symbol of life eternal. It feels like holding the beginning of civilization itself. When you rise again, the sky has deepened. The stars shimmer softly above the plain. You realize that the Sumerians were never entirely lost. They are simply woven into everything. The way you tell time, the way you measure the world, the way you dream of the heavens, the way you write your own story. All of it flows from them as surely as the rivers once flowed through Uruk and Yor. And yet, their greatest legacy may be something quieter, a kind of humility before the vastness of existence. For the Sumerians, even as they built great cities and sought wisdom in the stars, they knew they were small beside the gods, small beside the earth. Their stories are filled not only with triumph, but with acceptance that to live is to strive, to wonder, and finally, to return to the soil. As you stand in the twilight, you can almost hear their whisper, carried on the wind, the same one that brushed across the reeds of the Euphrates so long ago. Remember us, not as gods, but as the first dreamers. The stars brighten, the desert cools, the world turns quietly, still bound by the rhythms they set in motion. And somewhere, in the soft murmur of the evening, their legacy continues, not in monuments of stone, but in every thought that reaches beyond itself, every question that asks what it means to be human. For in truth, the story of Sumer never ended. It simply changed shape, from clay to language, from prayer to science, from myth to memory. And even now, as you drift toward rest, the ancient city of Eridu lies somewhere deep beneath you, its walls turned to dust, its wisdom still alive in the pulse of your own quiet heartbeat. The echoes of the gods have not faded. They have simply become your own. Imagine the sun setting over the plains of southern Mesopotamia. The air is golden and heavy, and the long shadows of the ziggurats stretch across the fields like memories too long to fade. The canals glimmer in the dying light, winding like silver threads between the cities that once called themselves eternal. This is the twilight of Sumer. It does not come suddenly, nor with thunder or flame. It comes slowly, like a candle burning low, the flame still warm but quieter each year. You walk along the streets of one of the last great Sumerian cities. The walls are still proud, the temples still tall, but there is something in the air, a quiet wariness. The songs of harvest are softer now. The markets close earlier. The old clay tablets speak of fields turning barren, of water not reaching the canals as it once did. The rivers that gave life to Sumer are shifting their course again. The great Euphrates, patient for millennia, begins to wander away from the cities it once nourished. Each season, the farmers dig deeper channels, hoping to follow it. Each year, the water grows harder to find. You can almost taste the salt in the soil, sharp and bitter beneath the heat. Generations of irrigation have brought prosperity, but also exhaustion. The land, like the people, is growing tired, and still the Sumerians endure. They record the flow of water with the same precision they once used to track the stars. They plant new grains that can survive the salt. They trade further north, where the rivers still run wide. Their resilience is quiet, their hope stubborn, but new powers are rising beyond the horizon. From the north come the Akkadians, speakers of a different tongue, worshippers of the same gods under new names. They admire Sumer's knowledge, its writing, its cities, and like a younger sibling, eager to step into the world, they begin to adopt and transform it. At first, the two peoples live side by side. The scribes of Akkad write in Sumerian, the priests of your prey in Akkadian. The languages blend, the cultures intertwine. But as the decades pass, the balance shifts. A new empire rises under Sargon of Akkad, a man of vision and conquest. His armies march south, and the cities of Sumer, weary and divided, bow before him. Yet, even in defeat, the Sumerians leave their mark. Sargon calls himself king of Sumer and Akkad. He rules from the model they created, divine kingship tempered by law, power guided by wisdom. The world changes, but the Sumerian soul remains at its heart. Still, for those who live through it, the transition feels like loss. You can almost see an old scribe sitting by lamplight in Uruk, his hands trembling as he writes. He has copied hymns to the goddess Inanna his entire life. Now he is asked to write them in Akkadian script. He dips his stylus into wet clay and pauses. The same gods, the same devotion, but somehow the words feel different. Is this how the world ends? He wonders. Not in silence, but in translation. Yet Sumer does not vanish all at once. For centuries, their cities continue to thrive under new rulers. Akkadian, Gushan, Ur-3, Babylonian. The people still speak Sumerian in their temples, still carve their dreams into clay. But gradually, like a river running dry, the language fades from the tongue and survives only in memory. You walk through the ruins of Lagash, where reeds now grow between the stones. In the distance, you hear the faint call of cranes, echoing across the plain. It is peaceful, almost beautiful, a quiet that feels not like death, but rest. The last great king of Sumer, Ibisen of yore, struggles to hold his kingdom together. He writes letters to his governors, send grain, send soldiers, send help. But the roads are no longer safe. The once stable trade routes crumble beneath the weight of drought and invasion. In time, the walls of your fall, the temple bells, grow silent. The king list records it with solemn simplicity. Yor was defeated. Its kingship was carried to Isin, and with that, the first civilization slips quietly into history. But endings are not only endings, they are transformations, the passing of a flame from one hand to another. Even as Sumer fades, its light spreads outward. The Akkadians continue their legacy. The Babylonians build upon it. The Assyrians refine it. And long after the last Sumerian tablet is written, the echoes of their wisdom still guide the world. You walk once more along the banks of the Euphrates, the stars reflected faintly in the dark water. Somewhere beneath your feet lie layers of time, cities built upon cities, dreams buried beneath dreams. Each layer holds a whisper of the people who once called themselves the first. Perhaps you can hear them now, faintly, softly, the murmur of scribes, the chant of priests, the rhythm of hammers shaping bricks. It is as though the land itself still remembers their touch. The twilight deepens, the air cools. You look toward the horizon and see the faint outline of a ziggurat, its edges blurred by time. It is broken, yes, but it still stands, a staircase to the heavens, reaching toward something unseen. The Sumerians believed that what is written endures, and in that they were right. Their words survive, pressed into clay, baked by the sun, hidden in the earth until the modern age. And when those tablets are unearthed, thousands of years later, the world rediscovers their voice. I am Sumer, the clay seems to whisper. I built the first cities. I gave you writing. I taught you to dream. And as you listen, you realize that Sumer never truly died. It simply became part of the foundation, the invisible architecture beneath all human civilization. The rivers may have changed their course. The cities may have turned to dust. But the story continues in every language, every law, every act of creation. The twilight of Sumer was not an end. It was the beginning of history itself. You take one last look at the horizon where the last light fades into night. The stars shimmer above the same stars they once named, the same constellations they once charted. And in their cold, steady glow, you sense what the Sumerians knew long ago, that even the mightiest kingdoms fall, but knowledge and the quiet will to endure last forever. The world is different now. The rivers have shifted, the cities turned to dust, and the stars no longer guide the same travelers. Yet somehow, as you stand in a museum surrounded by fragments of baked clay, the air feels familiar, as though time itself has curled back to greet you. Before you lies a tablet. It is small, no larger than your palm. The marks pressed into it are precise, deliberate, tiny wedges, forming the oldest written words known to humankind. They are not grand declarations or prayers to the gods. They are A-list, barley, goats, jars of oil. At first, it seems ordinary, but the longer you stare, the more sacred it feels. For this, too, is a kind of miracle the moment thought took shape. You can almost see the scribe who made it. He sits cross-legged in the cool shade of a temple wall, clay soft in his hands, the reed stylus between his fingers. Each mark he presses is both routine and revolutionary. He does not know that 5,000 years later, a stranger will read his work and feel the pulse of his world. In this small tablet lies everything that came after: history, poetry, law, science, faith, all born from the desire to remember. That, perhaps, is Sumer's truest legacy. Not the temples, nor the kings, nor even the gods, but the act of recording the fragile and fleeting moments of human life. You move to another case. Inside lies a different tablet, this one bearing a story, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Its surface glows faintly beneath the glass, the ancient words of courage and loss preserved by fire and chance. You read a line, translated into your tongue. There is no permanence. It feels as though the ancient voice is speaking directly to you, across millennia, through layers of earth and language. He is not warning you, only reminding. The Sumerians were the first to face the vastness of existence and ask the question that never leaves us: what does it mean to be human in a world that ends? Their answer was simple and profound: to build, to write, to love. to remember. Even knowing that everything fades, they pressed their dreams into clay and trusted that someone, someday, would understand. And here you are. You trace the lines of the translation with your eyes. Gilgamesh's grief feels familiar. His longing for immortality mirrors your own. The ancient hero's voice trembles with the same doubt and wonder that still live within you. Across 5,000 years, the distance between you and Sumer collapses. Outside the museum, the world hums with electricity. Screens glow, cars rush, satellites orbit, and yet, in every email, every blueprint, every coded line of text, the ghost of that first clay tablet lingers. The need to record, the desire to communicate, the hope to be remembered. It is as if all your modern words, the ones typed, printed, spoken, whispered, are echoes of that first mark in clay. You close your eyes and imagine the land as it once was. The twin rivers glitter under the sun. The ziggurats rise like mountains of brick. Children run through the markets. Priests sing hymns to the gods of wind and water. And in the distance, the hum of human creation fills the air, a sound older than nations, older than memory itself. It is the sound of civilization beginning. The Sumerians built not only walls and temples, but frameworks of thought. They taught that order could rise from chaos, that time could be measured, that justice could be written. They gave you numbers to count, calendars to mark, myths to dream. They made meaning tangible, as real as stone, as lasting as clay. Even now, when you plan a year, measure an hour, tell a story of gods or heroes, you are speaking their language without knowing it. The Sumerian spirit hums beneath the surface of every civilization that came after. And perhaps that is their greatest lesson, that to create is to endure. They knew their walls would crumble, their empires fall, but they built anyway. They wrote anyway. They believed that memory could outlast death, and they were right. The Sumerians no longer walk the earth, but their words still breathe. Their questions still echo. Their clay, hardened by sun and time, still carries the warmth of the hands that made it. You think of how fragile that clay once was, soft mud from the riverbank, shaped and pressed by a human hand, and you realize something quietly profound. Civilization began not with power, but with tenderness, with the simple act of someone kneeling in the dust and trying to preserve a thought. The memory of clay is the memory of humanity. As you leave the museum, the city around you feels transformed. The towers of glass and steel seem less like monuments of modernity and more like the ziggurats of an unbroken tradition. The hum of machines sounds almost like the murmur of ancient hymns. You walk beneath the evening sky. Above you, the stars burn with the same cold fire that once watched over Uruk and Eridu. You remember that the Sumerians believed the stars were the writing of the gods, symbols carved across the heavens to tell the story of existence. And perhaps they were right. Perhaps every light above is a word, and every human life a line in an endless poem. You stop, breathe, and look up. The night is vast, silent, eternal, and yet within that silence you feel connected to the scribe who pressed the first mark, to the builders who stacked the first bricks, to the dreamers who looked at the same sky and wondered what lies beyond it. 5,000 years separate you, and yet you are the same, a being who remembers, creates, and searches for meaning. This is what Sumer teaches, that civilization is not stone or power, but the courage to imagine beyond yourself, that every act of creation, a story, A law, a melody, a whisper is a defiance of oblivion. That memory is the only immortality ever granted to humankind. As the night deepens, you think of the ancient words carved in clay. The life that you seek, you will never find. For when the gods created man, they kept eternal life in their own hands. But as for you, fill your belly, be merry day and night. Cherish the child who holds your hand, and let your wife delight in your embrace. For these things alone are the lot of man. The voice of Gilgamesh fades into the quiet, and you understand. Sumer's wisdom was never about gods or glory. It was about living fully within the fragile moment, and trusting that even small acts of care will echo beyond your time. You smile softly. The clay may crumble, the rivers may change, but the memory, the story, endures, and so do you. And now, dear traveler, our journey ends. The kings of Sumer have faded back into clay, their voices softened into silence. The ziggurats stand only in memory, and the twin rivers whisper somewhere beyond the horizon. Yet, as you lie here, surrounded by the gentle stillness of your own world, you carry their legacy within you, the same heartbeat that once echoed through their cities, the same wonder that gazed upon the stars. History is not far away. It hums quietly beneath your skin, a reminder that every word you speak, every dream you chase, is part of an unbroken story that began long before you. Outside, the world continues, but inside, time has slowed. The air is calm. Your thoughts move like soft ripples across water. Imagine the clay tablets resting peacefully under the earth, untouched for thousands of years. Their markings no longer shout, but breathe softly, eternally, just like your breath, now steady, patient, alive. Let the noise of the present drift away. Let the comfort of your bed become the ancient soil of Sumer, warm, grounding, eternal. And as you sink deeper into rest, remember, even civilizations must sleep to rise again with the dawn. The story is done. The night is kind. You may let go now and dream in the language of clay.